I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Stansberry Radio Network.
Okay, so this is James Altucher, and I am honored to be joined on this episode of the James Altucher Show with Clayton Anderson, former astronaut. Clay, you were an astronaut for 15 years, right?
15, that's right.
And you spent 167 days in space.
Total over two space missions.
I want to read one letter that you got just to kind of set the scene here. You got this letter from, I guess, NASA in 1996, and it says, "Dear Clay, thank you for applying for the astronaut candidate program. We certainly regretted having to inform you that you were not selected for the program. 25 mission specialists and 10 pilot astronaut candidates were selected from over 2,400 applicants. Competition for the program was, again, extremely keen, and the limited number of openings precluded many high-qualified individuals, such as yourself, from being selected." How did you feel? You didn't not only get this letter, you got this letter for 15 years in a row.
Well, not exactly, because that year, the only reason I got the letter was because I made it far enough to get an interview. If you don't make it to that level, they don't send you anything.
Really?
So,
They just ignore you?
well, no.
I guess that's 2,400 letters. They don't want to waste the paper.
Probably. They send you a card, a small index card that says, "We've received your application. Thanks for playing. And then we'll be in touch." And then if you are fortunate enough to make it through all those other rounds to get to the point where they have brought you to Houston and interviewed you and talked to you and seen you and spent money on you for tests, then you don't get selected. That's when they send you a letter like that. So the first time I was interviewed was year 13. So that's the first time I got that letter. But my answer to the letter was boo.
You felt you were close. I mean, you were brought there. You got through all the tests. You thought you were super close. So it must have been like, I mean, were you expecting to get accepted then?
That's a good question. I don't know. Back then, I hoped to be accepted. I don't know if I ever expected to be selected. It was one of those deals where after 12 years of applications, in the 13th year I got offered an interview. I was very, very excited, and the flame was relit. I was ready to quit. As a matter of fact, my wife and I had been in Seattle just prior to that interview request looking for work. So when I came back to Houston from that trip to Seattle, a phone call was received a couple days later saying, hey, can you come for an interview? Well, to hell with Seattle, right? Now I'm back in the game. So I took the interview to see how it'd go.
What were you going to do in Seattle? Like work for Starbucks or Microsoft?
Well, yeah, maybe. I don't know. We were just, trolling.
Uh-huh. And so you first applied then, what year, like 1983, 84?
Yes. When I was first eligible.
And what happened then? Like, who do you apply to even to be an astronaut?
Well, that's
like
good.
It's not like there's a classified ad, like, we need astronauts, please send resume.
Actually, that's a good chapter in my upcoming book that comes out in June the 1st, The Ordinary Spaceman. There's a chapter called, Hey, there's an app for that.
Huh.
And it talks about the application process. So in this day of computers and stuff, you go to usajobs.gov, and you can go to the nasa.gov website, and you can search on astronaut application, and it will point you in the right direction. So unless they're looking for astronauts, though, that site part is not active, I think. I think you have to wait until you know that they're looking for astronauts, which is pretty well advertised.
So what were you doing before then that you became aware that, oh, there's an opening for an astronaut?
Well, in those days, it was different. In those days, way back in the early 80s, they asked for applications every year, and you updated your application. If you put your app in, they updated it you updated the next year. And then that way you were constantly in the game. And then at that time, they were selecting astronauts on an annual basis. And then when Challenger happened, it went from an annual basis to an every 2-year basis selection. So they were still very frequently looking for astronauts because there were so many launching on the shuttles and things. So in today's world, there are only 42, 43 astronauts American today. And they only go look for astronauts, new astronauts, when they feel that they need them to fill that cadre. So the selections are few and far between, and rather than picking 20 to 30 astronauts, they're picking 6 to 10.
Oh my gosh! So what kind of skills do you think you need now to be an astronaut? Because I'm assuming even more people apply now.
Yeah, the last application, I think, when they used social media to get the word out, which is also different from when I was applying, the number of applications went up into the 4,500 range, maybe even higher to 5,000, right? That many people want to be an astronaut. And so they only picked 8 this last time, so the odds are pretty stiff. But the skills you need are the same. You need to be a good team player. You need to be of above average intelligence. You don't have to be a genius, in my opinion. Otherwise, I never would have been selected. You need to have a degree in the physical sciences. You need to be a healthy person. Your eyesight needs to be reasonable and correctable.
So no glasses allowed?
Well, actually, no. It's new now. You can have LASIK surgery and be selected as an astronaut. In the old days, you had to have correctable to 20/20 vision, and that's still the case. But if you correct it via LASIK surgery, that's acceptable to them now. So things like that have changed, but other things have not. You can't have had a kidney stone in your past. They're going to be worried about your heart condition and cancer and histories and things like that in your family. So the bottom line is you always apply. Don't ever tell yourself, I can't get in because. Let them tell you, I can't get in because, right? Because you don't know what they're looking for and what they're thinking. So I would encourage everybody to always apply and let NASA put the X across your name. Don't you ever put the X there.
I sort of feel like you're giving advice not just for NASA, but for anything. Like, would you recommend that for, like, let's say I wanted to be an engineer at Google or something like that?
Absolutely. That's the story of my life is, I call the book The Ordinary Spaceman because I'm an ordinary guy. I'm a small town kid from the Midwest who, I was reasonably intelligent, but I wasn't a genius by any stretch of the imagination. I dreamed of being a fighter pilot, but my eyes weren't good enough. And then one day I ended up floating around the world as a United States astronaut because I didn't give up. I never quit. I worked hard. I dreamed big. I had a little luck along the way. I had the help of some of my friends and peers, but that applies to anything in the world. And that's one of the issues I have today is kids aren't encouraged like that enough. You have to have an environment where your dream is what your dream is, and you can achieve anything you want to be if you're willing to put in the effort to do so.
Well, go ahead.
And today, too many kids stop short, I think, for whatever reason. And they may be discouraged by a teacher. They may be discouraged by a friend, an adult, but we have to be an encouraging society. That's why I hope my book will be successful, that story can apply to thousands of kids across the Midwest that go to small schools all across America.
I think also, you have to be in a supportive environment. Like, obviously, your wife was not saying, "Oh, Clay, give up already. Don't apply again." Like, she probably, maybe some years she was saying, "Hey, get the application in earlier." Like, she probably was right behind you on every application.
Yeah, and that family aspect is huge, and today there is an issue with the American family component in places, and I had the love and the respect and the encouragement of my wife and my kids, right? When I was first training to go into space, I was away from home every other month in Russia, and I had a 6-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son who would grab at my pant legs on the day I was to leave and cry and say, "Hey, Dad, don't go. We don't want you to leave." And those are hard things to overcome, and those are the stories that people don't necessarily hear. Sometimes sacrifice is required to achieve those dreams, and the way you make that sacrifice and the people that sacrifice with you are hugely important as to your mental makeup and your strength and your confidence and the ability to do the job.
Well, and I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear it in your words. Like you said, your 10-year-old boy would be crying while you were about to leave for, I guess, 4 to 6 weeks for these training programs. How did you, we never get those years back with our kids. So how did you kind of balance off? Like, obviously, you wanted to be a good father. How did you balance off your passion with also trying to be a good father?
Well, it was important then that when I came home, I spent tons of time with the kids, and I tried to be at as many of their activities as I could be. My wife would send videos of my son playing Little League football and baseball to me, and my daughter in her gymnastics and her cheerleading efforts. So we were trying to stay in constant communication. And back then, like you and I are Skyping today, well, that wasn't necessarily as straightforward then as it is now. And I remember being just madder than hell in Russia because the computer they gave me in my Russian cottage that was supposed to be exactly like the one at my desk at NASA wouldn't allow me to do a video conference with my wife because the Russians had blocked the ports that would allow the signal to leave, and all that stuff was just hugely frustrating to me, that it wasn't simpler, and I had to work very hard to be able to communicate with my family. So those were, again, sacrifices that had to be blockades that had to be overcome. And so my focus when I returned back to America was family first, right? And it's always been that way. God, then family, then job. And my family was very understanding, that they knew that I wanted to do this with all my heart. And so their willingness to sacrifice Dad being away was important. I knew they cared, and that helped me do my job effectively. I mean, imagine if I was doing all this and my wife and my kids were PO'd because they didn't want Dad to be an astronaut. They didn't want Dad to be leaving all the time. I mean, that would be a terrible environment to try to focus and learn and learn all the things I needed to know to fly in space. It's so hard. It would be so hard to do that work knowing that my family was angry with me.
How do you think? So starting in 1984, I guess, you started getting rejected year after year. How did you sort of, okay, you would get the rejection postcard or whatever. How would you decide, okay, now for the next 365 days, I'm going to improve in this way to give myself greater chances? Like, how would you increase your odds?
Well, there are certain things you can do. You can always do. I could go climb Mount Everest if I wanted to help improve my odds, right? But that was not something that I had ever dreamed of doing, of wanting to do. However, I did want to learn to scuba dive. That's something I wanted to do my whole life. I did want to learn how to fly an airplane, and those things are positives if you put those on your application to be an astronaut. Are they required? Absolutely not. Do they make you look a little better? Sure they do. But I also was very, very active in my church and in my community. I was active with my kids in Little League and that sort of thing. And so for me, I wanted to do things that I love to do regardless of whether or not they would enhance my chances to become an astronaut. So some people, they lay their life out exactly as they want to be selected as an astronaut. You know, I'm going to go to MIT and get my degree and whatever. And then when I graduate from there, I'm going to go to this university and get a PhD in this. Then I'm going to learn to scuba dive. Then I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro. Then I'm going to come back and work for Boeing or Lockheed or somebody for 2 years. Then I'm going to get another PhD. And then I'm going to go do, you know, they just lay their life out with discrete milestones that they must achieve in their mind to become an astronaut. And, you know, that's okay. But what happens if you fail at one of those milestones, right? Now your whole plan is broken. And so I encourage people to find out what they love to do. What are you passionate about? If you do what you're passionate about, it doesn't matter if you never get selected to be an astronaut, right? You're still working at a job you love and you're doing the best you can possibly do. To be picked as an astronaut takes a huge amount of luck and being in the right place at the right time. And so to set a recipe for that selection is nearly impossible.
And so along the way, and I was reading this in your bio, you were an aquanaut before you were an astronaut. So like you said, you learned to scuba dive and you actually spent a significant amount of time underwater. Was it?
Yes, but that was after I was selected to become an astronaut. So
I see.
It was part of the training process. In order to live and work in space, you know, you're in a stressful place with a few other people, and they wanted to find ways to train astronauts on Earth and give them a taste of what it's like to live in space. And one of the clever ways was the idea of Aquarius, the habitat in Key Largo, Florida. What if we sent a few astronauts to live there for a couple, 3 weeks in a small can, in an extreme environment with other people, trying to do work away from their families? You know, all that is a great analogy to what it was like to live and work in space. So I was fortunate enough to get that opportunity before I ever flew, to kind of let me know what it was going to be like when I eventually did fly.
So again, it seems like in the years of your 15 years of trying of applying to be an astronaut, you had this, rather than having a very fixed goal, I have to be an astronaut or I will be unhappy. You had kind of an umbrella theme. I'm just going to keep doing these things within this umbrella of astronauthood that I love doing, and that will bring me closer and closer, perhaps, to this one goal. But you had other goals, too, within here. It was all fit under this umbrella.
Yeah, my overall umbrella goal was I wanted to work for NASA. I loved NASA. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I wanted to be a part of that. And the fact that I got to come to Houston in the Johnson Space Center to do that was kind of frosting on the cake, because if I never was selected as an astronaut, I was still happy as a clam working with the astronauts, working in the same place as all those people that were sending folks to the moon and sending shuttles into space and designing space stations and all that. I was a part of that, and that was very, very rewarding to me. And if I did good, if I worked hard and did well on the assignments that they gave me to do that job, I hoped that I would at least have a chance to be selected as an astronaut. And, in that 15 years I was an engineer here, there were probably maybe 2, 3 at the most astronauts that would even know what my name was. You know, I didn't hang with them. I didn't go out drinking with them. I played softball against some of them. We usually kicked their butt. And but I knew a few of them from work I was doing. We were on a project together, but that's all. And I didn't try to be a groupie with them and, suck up and stuff like that. I just tried to do my job as best I could do it and then submit my application and see if it fell out that I would be worthy of selection.
Were there groupies in the sense that, like, were the astronauts the kings walking around NASA at that time?
To some people, I think they were the kings and queens. I had a boss tell me one time, if you really want to be an astronaut, you have to hang out at the Outpost Tavern more, and you need to become a mission operations flight controller, a guy that sits in the control center in the front room. He says, if you don't do those two things, you'll never be an astronaut. Well, I didn't do either of those things, and look now, baby.
Well, why didn't you do those things? You just didn't want to?
They weren't me, right? I don't go hang out in taverns with anyone.
Yeah.
I might go have a drink with my family or with some friends, but that's not my style. And to be in the operational part of the control center, that was something that did appeal to me. But the organization I was working in, we didn't provide those people. I would have had to move to a new organization. And a funny story, or at least an interesting story, is at one point in my career, I did finally move to that organization. And I had a really great job, but it wasn't a job that would put me in the control center. It put me in the background. And I really was good at that job. I really enjoyed that job. And so when I had the opportunity to actually apply to become a flight controller and sit in the front room and work with all those talented people, I turned them down. I kept the job that I loved.
A lot of times when I'm talking to people, and I think when I was talking to Robert Greene, who wrote the book Mastery, I asked him, how do people find out what they're passionate about? And he often says, go back to when you were 10 years old and what were you fascinated by? What were you interested in? And you mentioned earlier, NASA was the organization that, as you put it, put folks on the moon. They put a guy on the moon exactly when you were 10 years old. So was this kind of like a triggering event for you? Like, were you fixated on the TV when this was happening?
Absolutely. So, as I point out in my shamelessly plugged book again.
Oh, we'll definitely plug this book. Don't worry. I'm going to read it backwards and forwards.
Okay. So when I was 9, my parents, my mom and dad, awakened my brother and sister and I on Christmas Eve in 1968, because that was the night that the Apollo 8 astronauts would go behind the moon for the first time. So sitting with my brother and sister on a small throw rug in front of a black and white TV in the small town of Ashland, Nebraska, we watched the Apollo 8 crew go from yakking with the control center team to total silence and just static. So for the 10 to 15 minutes that there was static coming through, I was freaking out. I didn't know what happened to these guys. Nobody knew.
Right.
And then it came around the other side of that rock. Man, when I heard the Quindar tone go and they spoke to the control center again, I thought, wow, that's what I want to do. And my mother would tell you that it was 2 or 3 years earlier that was the case, that we discussed that I would become an astronaut. And, I don't even remember that part, but she certainly did. She always told people about that story. So between that and the Apollo 8 guys going behind the moon, that's when I was hooked. Well, as a kid, you have that dream and you get into high school and real life and you begin to see, well, that's going to be kind of tough. So one of the other things I was passionate about was athletics and sports. And so doing those kind of things were what led me as a freshman in college to consider being an athletic coach and a teacher. But through a series of happenstance activities, I ended up with a summer internship at the Johnson Space Center in Houston with NASA. And like I said, that's all I ever wanted, was to be with NASA. And everything else above that was frosting on the cake.
And so when you finally got that letter that said, hey, welcome to the program, show up at this time, what was your first reaction?
I was thrilled. I had a hint that it was coming. My wife and I were at an event prior to the announcement of all the new astronaut candidates, and a lot of people were saying really bizarre stuff to me.
Like what?
Like, hey, you're going to be in Houston this week, and, don't get too far from your phone, and, like, hey, it's okay to relax. What the hell does that mean, Well, I kind of thought I knew what it meant, but I said, no way. There's no way. I'm not going to get myself pumped up for something only to be rejected again. And so I kind of put it out of sight, out of mind. And when the call came and my wife and I were totally alone at the Canaveral Lock Station looking at manatees. We couldn't run outside and say, "Hey, everybody, I'm an astronaut," because there was nobody there. The manatees, we told them, but they didn't really care. So, to get that letter a couple weeks later and tell me my report date and what I was supposed to do, that was pretty cool. It just started a wonderful adventure.
Who was the first person you called and said, "Hey, I did it"? Did you call your mom?
Well, I called Mom first, and she was gone. I called my brother second, and he was gone. I called my sister third, and she was gone. So then I called my father-in-law. My father had passed away in 1984. And so my father-in-law had allowed me, if you will, to, I called him Dad, and he treated me like his son. And so he was the guy that we picked up the phone. We called him in Arkansas, and he answered the phone, and I gave him the news, and there was silence on the phone and sobbing at the other end. So wow. It was pretty awesome that he would be the first one to hear me say that.
That's so great that he was so proud.
Absolutely. And he was as supportive and excited as anyone. And, he wears his STS 117 cap everywhere he goes with all his pins stuck in the bill, So he looks like a NASA geek, but that's okay. He's my father-in-law.
So now, once you got there and you knew you were kind of in the astronaut program, happiness of achieving a goal only lasts so long. Now then there's the next goal, which is actually getting you into space. Was
right.
that a kind of new set of metrics you kind of had to achieve and goals you had to achieve in order to reach that next level?
Sure. It's very competitive, despite what anyone tells you. We hired 32 type A personalities that year in 98, 25 Americans, and the rest of them were internationals. But they're all brilliant people. They're very capable, very highly skilled and talented. And if they all were under sodium pentothal, they'd tell you, "What's your next goal?" "I want to be the first guy in this class to get assigned to fly." And I was the same. Perhaps I wasn't quite as aggressive as some. There's kind of a bell curve of aggression where some at the far right of the bell curve really go after it, and they're sucking up to everybody and trying to do the right thing and volunteering for everything. And then there's the guys at the back end of the bell curve that maybe take it a little less. And then there's those of us in the middle. So the idea that I try to subscribe to is I always want to be just slightly above average. Right? Because if you consider 32 geniuses and I'm slightly above average, that's pretty good. And the other mantra that veteran astronauts sometimes tell you is keep your head down and keep coloring. And so that's code word for, don't stand out too much. Don't be a jerk, and don't be discovered for the wrong reason, if that makes any sense.
So it seems like this strategy of slightly above average, but let's combine that with consistency. So if you're slightly above average every single day and someone is kind of all the way out there on the bell curve of aggression, they might burn out, or as you say, they might stand out in the wrong way. But if you're there every day, slightly above average, that is kind of almost a way of compounding your possibility of making it into space.
Yeah, that was kind of my philosophy, right? Is, when you're a baby astronaut, what people want as a baby astronaut is everybody wants to do a spacewalk, or everybody wants to be assigned to the flight deck of a shuttle crew, or everybody wants to run the robotic arm, right? Well, everybody can't do that right away. But we had guys lobbying for those jobs right off the bat. Well, I just took the job they gave me, right? I did what I was told. I went to the courses I was told to, or the classes I was told to go to. I tried to do my best. I studied reasonably hard. I probably didn't study as hard as some. I probably studied harder than others. But, my goal was to be solid and steady. Be the steady Eddie, not be the blip on the map, on the radar. And I think that paid off for me. Over time, people began to see that I was a good team player, that I was a leader, that I didn't need to be told what to do. And I was good at what I did. Also, I was 6 foot tall and about 195 pounds of pretty good muscle. I worked out all the time. So when the people that eventually looked at who should we put in spacewalk training, well, they looked down the line, they saw this 6 foot tall football, basketball, track player from college and said, hey, he might be good. When I finally got that opportunity, I was good. So, patience is a virtue in this game. And sometimes people don't exhibit that patience. Most of the time they do. These people are really smart folk, and they know how the game is played because there is a game that gets played, and you just have to be smart. It's more the tortoise and the hare, right? The slow and steady, I think, wins the race. And eventually, whether you're the first guy to fly or the last guy to fly is irrelevant. The goal is you want to fly, and then you want to fly again.
And so once you became in the astronaut program, how long was it until you were actually in space?
So from 1998, when I was selected, and I finally went into space in 2007, which is quite a long time to wait. There have been astronauts that waited longer. There have been astronauts that flew much quicker. I have no idea why. It's just the way the game went, and there were a lot of astronauts in the 96 class, a lot of astronauts in the 98 class, and over time, the classes, the astronauts that were selected earliest flew first, right? And so the class of 96, most of them all flew before the class of 98 even got assigned, right? There's kind of a hierarchy there, but that's not even the case these days. Sometimes new classes, they put some person in there to fly before somebody from the previous class goes. And that kind of breaks with tradition, and it's been hard to stomach by some.
And so when you got the message, okay, Clay, we're gonna put you on this mission. You're gonna go into space. That must have been another moment where it was like, this is gonna happen.
Well, you'd think so, but it didn't actually turn out that way. So at the time, you could either fly on the shuttle or the station. And my thought was it would be best for me and my family if I flew a short 2-week shuttle mission, right? We'd understand what it's like. We'd get a feeling for the stresses involved and all that sort of stuff. And then I'd come back, be a big hero, and then somebody would assign me to the station for long duration. Well, it happened in the opposite direction. I got a call one weekend, not from the boss. Usually the story goes that astronauts get called by the boss, and he tells them of their flight assignment. I got called by the boss's deputy, and the question she asked me was, hey, you still interested in maybe doing a long duration space flight? And I go, well, yeah. Well, yeah, we've been talking, and you might get penciled in here as such and such and such and such, and you might want to call the boss. Oh, I got to call the boss? So I called the boss, and I said, hey, so-and-so told me to call you about flight assignments. He goes, yeah, we're kind of thinking about you a little bit, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, which one gets me to space faster? Because we just had Columbia, and all that kind of stuff. And will the shuttle assignment get me into space faster, or a space station assignment? He goes, well, actually, I think maybe a space station assignment will get you into space quicker. So I said, okay, let me talk to my wife. I went back and talked to Susan because the kids were young enough at that time, they were even younger than 6 and 10. And so we felt it was a good time to begin this trips to Russia all the time, because that way the kids wouldn't be quite so aware. And we agreed to go. We agreed to do it. So shortly thereafter, I began, training for all those trips to Russia and back and forth. And I was still only a backup. I wasn't even assigned to a flight, It didn't happen the way I dreamed of it happening. I kind of fell into it with time, so much so that I had to ask for a press release to be released. I mean, it was kind of crazy. It was different. And you contrast that to my flight on STS-131. When I got called down the office, I thought I was going to get my butt chewed.
Why do you think that?
Because a couple of things had happened. I'm kind of an outspoken guy. And when I think the processes can be improved, I speak out. And it turns out that I spoke out as a member of the crew of Expedition 15 in 2007 and returned to Earth in the astronaut penalty box. And so when I was called down that day, I was still, to my knowledge, in the astronaut penalty box. And when I stepped into the boss's office and I said, what did I do now? And he said, no, you didn't do anything. You're fine. And he said, I want to give you an assignment. And I said, what? You want to send me to Florida, California, what? And he goes, no, a space flight assignment. And I said, you're kidding. Really? I'm on probation. And no, you're not. And so he assigned me to STS-131. And when I learned who the crewmates were, I was so excited. That was how it was supposed to happen, right? So then I'm all excited. I call my wife and I act depressed and I say, I got to talk to you right now. Can you meet me out by the ponds? There's a nice little seating area at JSC. And she met me and she was freaking out. You know, she thought I'd been, kicked out of the astronaut corps. And I told her we were going to fly again. And when I told her who the commander was, she was really close to the commander's wife. So it was a great day. That was how it was supposed to happen the first time, but it actually didn't.
But now the first time you were in space for what, 157 days, something like that?
152.
152, sorry. And that strikes me as, I don't think personally I would be able to handle that, just because A, I'd miss my family, and B, I don't know if I can handle being like in essentially a room for 152 days.
Well, it's a pretty big room. I guess they say today it's about like a 4-bedroom house with 2 bathrooms. Actually, it's quite comfortable to live there. I never had any claustrophobic tendencies while I was there. Sometimes you wish you look out the window and you long to be able to smell the grass and the breeze and the ocean and that sort of thing. But for me, the 152 days went by very quickly. I only had 2 days that I remember I was actually bored. So bored that I fired up Tiger Woods' golf software program, and tried to play golf with Tiger Woods, and that didn't go over too well, so I gave up on that. But it's a large place. You can get away if you need to. If you need that space where you need to just be alone, which I needed a few times. So it's actually quite comfortable to live there for an extended period. Now, I think my wife and I chatted about this afterwards or toward the end of my first flight, that 6 months we could have handled, another month, maybe a month and a half. But after that, it would have gotten difficult for both of us, her on the ground with family and me in space away from the family. So they do a great job of giving us opportunities to have video conferences with our family every week. I could pick up a telephone software program and call Susan, my wife, every day. I could call friends and family if the signals were aligned. So you have and you have email, constant email capability and things like that. So you're not as essentially far removed as people may think. Now, if you go to the planet Mars, eventually it's going to be a whole different ballgame. But being on the station was very cool. If I were to do a year's long mission like the astronaut Scott Kelly's went up, I think he's going to be bored out of his brain. But that's just me.
So you get on the station, and then there's the next goal, which is doing a spacewalk. How long did it take before you were like out there by yourself, just in the vast infinite of space?
Well, I got to space on June the 8th and did our first spacewalk on the 23rd of July. And the increment, the 5 months I was there, was really, really well timed out. It just happened that way. I got lucky. I arrived and had a very busy mission with the guys that brought me there. Once they left, I tidied up from all their messes, and then the next thing we focused on our spacewalk prep. We did our spacewalk in July, and the next thing we did was focus on a shuttle that was coming to visit us in August. And then once those guys were gone, we focused on our next big event, which was moving the docking structure from the station with the robotic arm. And then after that was over, we focused on me going home. So the spacing of my increment was just perfect in terms of I always had something big to look forward to. That helped us not get bored and not go crazy. So when July was coming, my first spacewalk, that was a pretty intense time of preparation and excitement and actually going out into space.
And how did you...
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Sounded like R2-D2 there.
That's our parrot.
Oh,
Astro.
How did you actually get home?
Well, I was scheduled. At that time, we had what we called Shreks, shuttle rotating expedition crew members. So Sonny Williams was Shrek 1, and I was Shrek 2, just like in the movies. And we were tied as shuttle crew members that were tied to a piece of station hardware that was being delivered by the shuttle. So we had intimate knowledge of that piece of hardware that we were flying with. And so as part of that, then we would ride home on a shuttle. And for me, that meant STS-120, that crew with Commander Pam Melroy was going to come bring me home. They launched in October of 2007, and we landed in November of 2007.
Were you scared at all of re-entry, like the whole, heat shield thing?
No, I
Was there
think
even a moment of fear?
no. I think you think about it a little bit, but you're so busy and you're so wrapped up in the moment that you don't. The fear is trained out of you, first of all,
Right.
and then where you are, you're just a passenger. So it's like being on an airplane in the back. If something's happening, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So out of sight, out of mind, probably, and believing that those thousands of people on the ground have done everything in their power to make it safe and bring you home safely. So there's way more reason to be confident than there is to be scared.
And once you had gotten into space, what was the thing that maybe surprised you the most? Despite all the training, all the years, all the studying, what just sort of blew you away that this is unlike anything you had ever experienced before?
A couple things, probably zero gravity is the first thing. I mean, living.
Even though you had simulated for that probably many times.
Yeah, I mean, you can't simulate it when you're going to the bathroom in zero gravity. You can't simulate living every minute, right? You can fly in the airplane that gives you 30 seconds maybe, but it's not the same, right? It's not the same to wake up, to sleep, to float out, to go fly down and go to the bathroom and to float to work. And I mean, you're Superman every day. And that ability it's really hard to describe. And it's one of the most fun and most complex things about living in space is the fact that you're not, you don't have any weight. You're just floating all the time.
Was it ever kind of depressing in the sense that every physical activity you had been used to, going to the bathroom, showering, eating, drinking, scratching the itch on your nose, everything was different and had to be overcome, was an obstacle to overcome?
It was. Some things were harder to overcome than others, but I didn't ever think of it as a big pain. I always found it to be an interesting challenge. Yeah, I'd be frustrated because it's easy to lose stuff. If you Velcro a tool to the wall and you spin too fast accidentally and your shirt hits that tool by accident, you may not even know that you've imparted a force to it that's now sending it floating out of the way and you don't know where it went. And looking for stuff you've lost, that can be frustrating. So maybe that's the frustrating thing that everybody deals with. But most of it, zero G is a blast.
Now, one thing I read was that you grow under zero G, I guess, because your bones stretch out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the fact that there's no force from gravity on your spine means that most astronauts will stretch a little bit in that area, which makes them a little taller. So I think I probably gained an inch and a half to an inch and 3/4.
And how long after you landed did you get back to regular height?
Well, nobody gets measured immediately, but it's pretty fast. Once gravity's tugging on you, and your spine and everything back there is pretty malleable, so that force pulls it down pretty quickly.
Does it hurt when you're back in regular gravity in the sense that you're like, what is this? I'm now being compelled to stand on the ground.
Yeah, I didn't hurt, I don't think. I hadn't sat down in 5 months, and sitting was a pain. Walking was difficult at first, but your brain is pretty effective at figuring it out and bringing you back to normal pretty fast. Most of the problem for me was I was exhausted. We'd had a long day in space, and then we land and had even a longer day on Earth. And so I was just ready to go to sleep. And after 24 hours, I was much, much better.
And so now, veering in a slightly different direction, what's going to happen to the space program now? So basically, we're outsourcing to companies like SpaceX. Do you see less humans going into space and more robotics? Like, what's the direction of things?
The outsourcing, I think, is a good thing overall, right? It's like the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk. When they were flying their little airplane 122 feet across the beach, they had no idea that United and Delta and KLM and all that would be flying people around the world every day. So from that perspective, it's the right direction that we should be moving. The question here is, again, as with anything, is we have to be able to do it safely and with a competitive price, right? If it's going to cost everybody $250,000 to $20 million or whatever to go into space, there aren't many people that are capable of doing that. And for me, the goal is that everyone should have an opportunity somehow to at least be able to get there in some part, and that's coming. It's just going to take a while. And, space hotels, I think they're in the future. I think commercial people going up for little weekends in Johnson space, that's in the future. I just don't know when, because we have to remember, as virtue of the orbital Antares flight that exploded off the pad the other day, this is hard. What we do is hard, and what we do is expensive, and what we do is complex. And today's people want things now, right? They want their DVR. Oh, my DVR broke. I run out to Best Buy and I buy a new one. And I plug it in and I'm ready to go. I haven't missed a beat. Well, spaceflight, you can't really do that. It's a little tougher than that. So,
and what do you think about Mars? Is that in the 100-year future, 10-year future? Like, is that possible?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know what 100 or 10 years. I don't know which, but it's possible, but I don't think we're ready yet. For example, when people ask me about Mars, if I were to go personally, I would need a vehicle that was at least the size of 3 space station modules. And in order for me to be successful and to be comfortable, hold on, the doors keep opening.
No problem. It's amazing how much your bird sounds like R2-D2. I just keep thinking of Star Wars there.
Yeah, hey, whatever works. But, the commercial idea is the right idea. And
what do you mean the commercial idea? The idea of outsourcing the trip to Mars?
Well, the easy stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And call it easy, but outsource the stuff that you're comfortable they can do safely and efficiently, which is what we're doing with cargo delivery, right? To outsource it to SpaceX and to Orbital and to other companies like that, that removes the burden from NASA and allows us to focus on other things like going to Mars. But SpaceX and Orbital have to continue to demonstrate that they can do it safely and efficiently and for lower cost. Well, all that was going really well until Orbital's rocket blew up off the pad. So they're going to fix that. They're going to solve that. But what does that do to the overall market, the overall thought process of commercial space flight with contractors like that? So, it just remains to be seen. Imagine if humans would have been on that rocket, where we'd be.
Right. Now, what would be, let's say, what would be your advice now to young kids who want not necessarily a career as an astronaut, but any highly competitive career? Like, obviously, you were in one of the most competitive careers of history. What would be your advice to a 10-year-old now starting out who has one of these types of dreams? And this seems kind of like almost a naive question, but it's one I'm sure every parent is probably curious about.
Well, I think that the advice you gave from the guy that wrote the book is look back at what you love to do when you're 10, and then you have to be a solid student. You can't blow things off. And I encourage kids to be very well-rounded. I think personally, this is just Clay talking, that well-rounded people make better citizens. So for example, and I don't mean to be negative in any way, but the fact that I was good in school and was good in sports and was good in music and did a lot of things helped me become the person I am today. Does that make me better than the person that gets straight A's at school and just plays the violin? I don't know. But from a big picture standpoint, well-roundedness, experiences, facing adversity in many different regimes is important to making you strong, making you a better team player, making you more independent and confident with the ability to overcome that adversity. And I think those are important traits for anybody who has a dream. If they want to be an NBA basketball star or a police officer or a teacher or a lawyer or a doctor or an eye surgeon, all those things are awesome dreams, and they can achieve them with hard work and dedication. But I think you'll achieve them more effectively if you are full of breadth and depth. If that makes sense.
I like the phrase facing adversity as opposed to overcoming failure. I think there's too much what I call failure porn out there right now, where you have to kind of like fail fast, fail hard, fail a lot to achieve success. I don't necessarily agree that failure is the key to success.
Yeah, I think that I know where you're coming from. I've heard that a lot too. And failure, you don't want to fail. Who wants to fail?
Right.
But you always face adversity. I mean, every day you face adversity, right? If you get a knot when you're tying your shoe, that's adversity. It's a very small example, but it is.
Yeah.
And what do some people do? They get frustrated, they yell and scream, and they can't get the dang knot out. Well, face adversity and use your fingers or go get a tool and take the knot out and retie your shoe. How you deal with stuff that little leads to how you deal with stuff that's big. And I agree with you. I think that facing adversity is much more appropriate than telling people you must fail in order to succeed. Well, yeah, I think you will fail in certain aspects of life, but sometimes that doesn't matter. It's how you deal with the adversity that took you to that failure and figure out ways to get around it.
Now, a final question or two, I really appreciate the time you spent with me. But what's your favorite space movie? Did you like Gravity with it was George Clooney? I forget the actress's name now.
See, I forget George Clooney's name because Sandra Bullock in Spanx was pretty good. But the movie was entertaining. Its premise was BS, but what the guys did, what the people did with the movie visuals was amazing.
How'd you like the fact though that she was sort of reluctant about being an astronaut? Like she was sort of like compared to what you had been through.
What am I doing here? Why? All that was so hokey that it's hard to deal with. Most people dream of being an astronaut, and to put somebody in her place with what sounded like she had minimal training. I mean, well,
it doesn't happen.
Comment on that, but it doesn't happen now. But imagine though, if we have commercial spaceflight, and people, you're not going to train somebody to go to a hotel in space. I certainly hope you're not going to train them for 3.5 years, right? My dream for all that is that they figure out how to train people with minimal skills. Like when you and I go into a hotel today, we know exactly what to do. We go to the desk, they give us a key card. We go to the room, we put the key card in the slot, the door opens, we turn on the TV with the remote, we crank up the microwave if we're going to heat something up, we run the coffee maker. That's what we need when ordinary citizens begin to go into space, right? You need, who wants to do it if it's going to take 2 years of training to get to space? You need it to be relatively painless, I think, for the people, which means we have a lot of work to do. But that's just Clay's philosophy, no one else's.
And why'd you finally retire from NASA?
I was essentially told I didn't have the right stuff anymore.
How were you told that?
You'll have to read the book. It's a good story. Well, I think it's a good story. I was called in and asked about my future. And when I gave them my response that I wanted to fly again, but I wasn't ready now because my children needed their dad at home, but I would love to fly later, I was summarily dismissed as, okay, then you're done, basically. They didn't use those words, but...
was there an ageism thing happening, or did they say you were too old now, or...
No, what they said was they had better choices than me to fly in space, which was pretty hard to hear. It was untrue. Yeah, there were others that were better, but there were many, many, many that flew again that were not. It was a numbers game. I think they were kind of looking to get rid of some people, and if you didn't give them the answer they needed, which I'll fly tomorrow. I couldn't give them that answer, right? I felt that I wanted to fly again, but I wasn't ready to put my family through the tax of 2.5 to 3 years of travel and training again, right? It's a big commitment. And to me, your family has to be on board with that commitment.
Yeah.
My kids were at the age where I wanted to be there for their football games and their volleyball games and all that stuff. And if I had a few years so they could graduate and go to college, then I could fly again. But they didn't see it the same way. It was a tough day when I heard that. It was even a tougher 2 years when I tried to hang around and wait out the management that was there. When I waited them out and got the same answer again, even more, not cutthroat, but even more, basically the answer I got when I asked, I'd like to fly again, is that possible? No, with no explanation. And, well, could I have a role in this organization to utilize and capitalize on my experience and expertise? No. So that pretty much told me that it was time to go, and NASA had offered an early retirement option. So that was fortunate in that I could retire and maintain my health benefits with the government, which are pretty good. Right. And now I'm on a new adventure, and that adventure's been good. Would I love to go to space again? Absolutely. Would it be new to me and different? No. If I went back to space to the station, I'd probably be bored because it's the same thing. They're doing the same things I was doing when I was up there. But once you touch and taste microgravity, you always want to taste it again.
Well, what do you do now? Like, what are these new adventures that keep you as kind of excited as you were for so many years before, when you were, striving to get into space and then getting into space? Like, how do you keep yourself with that level of excitement?
Well, I do public speaking, motivational speaking. I love to do that. I especially love to tout NASA and why she's important. And the nice thing about that is I don't have to use NASA talking points anymore, right? I can speak from the heart. I can speak truth. I can speak from my experiences of what really happened to me, what actually happened to me, but why NASA is important and what we do is important. And that's fun. I teach part-time at Iowa State University, where I got my master's degree in aerospace engineering. I enjoy that. I'm part of their motivation force, right, to get kids into aerospace and engineering in general and to keep them there and to graduate them there. So we're doing some exciting things at Iowa State. And then the third thing that has been a big focus of mine, and it will be for the next 6 or 8 months, is my first book is coming out in June, called The Ordinary Spaceman: From Boyhood Dreams to Astronaut. And that's the story. It's about a guy who I consider myself pretty ordinary, and I want all those other ordinary people out there to think that they can accomplish and dream and do the things that I did as well. So those three things are keeping me pretty busy, plus honeydews at the house, and my son's a football player in college, so I travel to watch him. My daughter's big in acting and volleyball and all her activities, so I'm having a good time with the flexible schedule. I don't have to work 60 hours a week if I don't want to, and I can support my wife and her career. So it's good. Retirement's good. I didn't realize that when I first left NASA, but it was the right thing to do.
Well, I can't wait to read your book. It's coming out June 1st, I think, 2015.
Right.
And the title again?
Is The Ordinary Spaceman.
The Ordinary Spaceman.
From boyhood dreams to astronaut, yeah.
Was it hard to write the book, to sit down and actually write 60,000 words or however many words it is? Book writing's hard.
Well, what I started to do, and I don't know that I ever had a book in my dreams, but what I did was when I began training as an astronaut, we do some pretty cool things like the living underwater on Aquarius. And so during that effort, one of our jobs was we had to write short journal entries, and NASA would post them. This is way before social media. So NASA would put them on a website and hope that people would go read the stories. Well, I really liked writing those stories. I thought my stories were good. Other people really liked them too. And so after that, as I went and got assigned to fly in space and I traveled to Russia, there were very cool things that would happen periodically in Russia. Your first suit fit or your first trip in their centrifuge. And so I began to write short stories that NASA posted on their blog. And as I got deeper into it, I thought, this might make an interesting book. So I had the beginnings of a book, if you will, and I did the journals for myself and for NASA all the way through my first mission and landing. And then as I got through that, I had met a young lady named Nevada Barr, who's a New York Times best-selling mystery writer. And Nevada encouraged me to write a book. She wanted me to write a murder mystery in space, which that may be coming, but we'll see. But I said, well, I feel more comfortable just making this thing a book first, right, to see what the process is like. So she was very helpful in giving me advice and pointing me to people I could talk to. But I don't have a ghostwriter. This is just Clay. And I think the book is turning out nicely. It's very exciting. It's very fun. Was it hard? Oh, there are times when it was frustrating, but I don't know that it was ever hard. It took me, once I retired, I worked pretty hard for about 5 months to pull it all together into a manuscript. Fortunately, I found one publisher who would bite, and that was the University of Nebraska Press. Given that I'm the first and only astronaut from the state of Nebraska, you would certainly hope they might be interested. And they have a history of good space books to turn back to. So with their help, I'm putting out the book on June the 1st, and it's getting very exciting. You know, now things are really starting to happen. And
that is exciting. And you're very accessible on Quora, which is the Q&A site, Quora. You're very, people can ask you questions, you answer them. I can tell you're a good writer and you're very concise in your answers. I'm really looking forward to the book. It's going to be exciting.
Well, thank you. People can follow me on Twitter. I'm at astro_Clay. My website is www.astroclay.com. And then they can also go to my Facebook fan page, which is the Facebook page. And then I think you / Clayton Anderson or Astro Clay, and you can find me on Facebook as well. So between those 3 social media sites, I try to stay active. I love to interact with the people. I think that's what it's all about. It's not just about me posting stuff. It's about me, trying to interact with those that post back. And Quora I found to be very, very fun. It takes a little more of my effort in writing my answers because I want them to be legit, and I don't want, I don't answer questions that I don't know the answer to, right?
Right.
And people pose some very bizarre questions on that site. But
someone even asked you if you ever saw a UFO while you were in space.
Well, and it was interesting because I responded no, because it said all astronauts see UFOs, and I said no, they don't. Well, their definition of UFO included a piece of space debris, right? A piece of well, that to me, that's a different. When you and I say UFO, at least me, the first thing I think of is silver flying saucers that are zooming around in space and sending lights down to Earth, and I think that's what most people think. And so that's how I answered the question. So I had to reply to that person and say, hey, here's how I was coming at the question. I wasn't talking about dust and debris. Yeah, I saw dust and debris.
Well, again, Clay, thanks so much, and I'm looking forward to the book. I really enjoy your answers on Quora, so I know this is going to be a great book and very inspirational. And thanks again for joining me on my show.
You bet. It was a pleasure, and I'll look forward to the next time, sir.
Excellent. Thanks, Clay. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye now.
For more from James, check out the James Altucher Show on the Stansberry Radio Network at stansberryradio.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
Rehearsals for the school play were really coming along.
Bigger smile, Mr. Squirrel?
Until a custodian accidentally threw away the costumes.
Oh no.
Everyone was rattled. Miss Garrity forgot how to play. and the Queen of the Hedgehogs almost quit.
Find a new queen.
But replacement costumes were shipped with FedEx, and with added peace of mind from picture proof of delivery, everyone could focus on the perfect opening night. FedEx, where now meets next. For residential delivery only.